Hey guys, welcome back to Zane Customs. So for any of you who have seen my previous videos, you'll be pretty familiar with this process. I like to start off my sculpts in Forger, which is an app for the iPad Pro, just because it's easy, it's quick to use, or quick to learn I should say, easy to use, and it's on the iPad so I could take it anywhere. I have a lot of sculpts that have been started on Forger and then eventually get moved up to ZBrush, which you'll see that in this video. So right now, in Forger, I'm really just working on roughing out the whole shape of the character I'm working on. I really don't go too crazy with the details because, again, Forger's just an app for the iPad Pro. It's not a professional app, so it can't handle an insane amount of detail. And when I send this model over to ZBrush, sometimes if you have too much detail and some weird geometry, it can get messed up, and you'll see that later. That does end up happening, so I try not to go too far on it. But really what Forger's great for is just kind of sketching out ideas, which was actually really amazing in this case because I did this sculpt for a sculpting challenge. This challenge was run by a guy named Rafael Grassetti. For those of you who don't know, he is one of the, I believe, art directors on the God of War games. He's just an amazing sculptor, amazing artist, and every year he puts on a sculpting challenge, and if you win, there's a bunch of cool prizes, and he'll do shout outs on his Instagram and just a bunch of cool stuff like that. So I entered last year and never made a video on it, and this year I didn't want to miss out again, so I entered, and I was smart enough to record myself this time. Unfortunately, last year when I did it, I only had a week to work on it because I didn't know about the competition up until the last week of the actual competition itself. And similar thing happened this year. I didn't realize it was going on as soon as it was, and also I was working on a lot of other projects, and unfortunately I was only able to spend a week on this sculpt as well. So next year, that's definitely something, if he continues to do these competitions, that's something that I really want to dive into and spend a lot more time on, just because the people that won had amazing sculpts, and I'd like to get one of my sculpts to that level. Big projects. I've spent the last couple of months working on one really big project, and unfortunately I can't show it off to you guys right now. It's pretty much done on my side of things, so I should be able to show it with you pretty soon here, but that's pretty much the main reason I haven't been putting videos out, and I just want to apologize for that. Anybody out there who was looking forward to a new video every week, I'm sorry about that. I'm definitely going to get back into putting out videos. It still won't be once a week. I just don't have the amount of time I used to have, and also I want my sculpts to be better than they have in the past. I want to keep getting better and building on what I have, so I'm just going to spend as much time as I need to on each individual sculpt. But definitely it's not going to be months in between videos. It'll be 2-3 weeks hopefully at the most. But yeah, I just want to say sorry about that. There's just a big project I'm working on that you'll be able to see soon. I'm really excited about. And also, thank you so much for everyone who watches my videos and stuck with me, didn't unsubscribe or anything like that. And also, I haven't put out videos in a couple weeks, and I've still been gaining subscribers. So thank you to everybody who's subscribed recently, and just anybody that subscribed at all. And I also want to mention anybody that's been commenting, asking for specific sculpts. I'm still working on those, like I mentioned with Forger. It's not capable of doing a full sculpt, at least to the amount of detail I want. So I have a lot of sculpts that have been started in Forger, and I just need to finish them in ZBrush as I get the time going forward. So a lot of those people that have asked for things, zombie pigment, anything like that, any Minecraft thing, anything that you've commented, I've started on a lot of those, and I will get to them eventually, but it's just going to take me a little bit longer than I originally was hoping, but I'm definitely going to get to it. And thank you so much for commenting. So back to the sculpt here. You can see I'm working on the face now and really starting to kind of find the form I want to go with. So like I said, this whole idea came from wanting a human that's getting turned into a demon. And I had a D&D campaign I ran with my friends a long time ago where people were getting cursed, and their bodies, their bones were twisting and doing all sorts of weird things, and it was turning them into demons. So kind of had the idea of what if this guy's cheekbones were protruding out of his face and then kind of growing back in and out the top of his head or out the top of his skull, and that would be his horns. Pretty dark, kind of graphic if you think about it in that way, but that's kind of the idea I was going for. And now I'm to the point where I'm really happy with my base model and can't go too much farther detail-wise, so now I'm moving it over to a program called ZBrush. So ZBrush is amazing. It's a professional sculpting program. Pretty much anybody doing any sculpting for a movie, a video game, TV show, anything, any form of media, there's a pretty good chance they're using ZBrush. It's got a lot of capabilities and it's just amazing. So I started learning it about a year ago, and I don't know, or it's over a year ago, I don't know probably half of what you can even do in here. There's so much to learn. Every time I learn something new, I beat myself up for not learning it before, because it makes the whole sculpting process so much faster, easier, makes your sculpts look better in general. But as far as this sculpt goes, the main thing that I want ZBrush for that Forger can't handle is a high amount of detail and also the posing. So as far as posing your sculpt goes, you can do it in Forger, but it's not great. It's really difficult to do. It's time consuming, and I usually end up just getting more frustrated than it's worth. Whereas in ZBrush, it's a lot easier to do, and they have a system called Remesh or Dynamesh, which basically will fix your model if you're moving the arms around and then you have weird geometry after that. It'll just apply a even layer of polygons across your whole model and just makes everything work a lot better. And sometimes you have to go back in and resculpt details. That's why I try to repose my guys as early as possible when I get them in here. If you wait too long and you have a lot of detail, then you go to repose it, you're going to have to resculpt a lot of that detail if you're dynameshing or doing like ZRemesh or something like that. But if you do it early on, then it ends up looking pretty good. And you can see right here, I'm really starting to focus on adding detail at this point. I didn't go too crazy with it before because I knew that I was going to end up posing him. Another thing I forgot to mention is this whole sculpt is just the bust, meaning from the waist up. And that's just because the sculpting competition that I was entering, that was one of the parameters. It was just a bust, and you had to follow the theme, which was Underworld. And with Underworld, you can kind of go wherever you want with it as long as it makes somewhat sense, but that's why it's just a bust. And also it kind of worked having this whole idea of his insides getting twisted together and doing all this weird stuff. It's kind of cool to have his spine pop out and kind of get twisted up with his ribs. And you also notice I have a little ball in between his rib cage and where his spine is coming down. And that was just because, again, this was kind of based off a D&D character that I had back in the day. And for that character, or characters, they were all getting corrupted by something that was put inside of them, and they were all getting, it was almost like a black hole. Everything in their body was getting twisted and getting pulled into this little ball that was in their stomach. So that's kind of why I threw that in there, just for fun. And now I'm starting to work on the coloring phase. This is probably, coloring in general is one of the things that, like I said earlier, every time I learn something new, I wish I would have known it earlier, just because it makes everything so much easier. Coloring is one of those things that I knew pretty early on, but I wish I would have spent more time on and learning how to use it better and really focusing on that for my sculpts, because it can make a sculpt look so much better. You also see, there's another thing I'll show you at the end of the video, as far as like rendering the characters out to make them look good, but coloring is such an important part, and I'd say this particular sculpt has one of, if not the best colors I've ever done in ZBrush. I'm super happy with the way it turned out, and I spent a lot of time on it. And I think going back over and looking at some of my old sculpts, I can definitely tell, and you guys could probably tell, the sculpts that I just kind of rushed the colors through with. And one of the reasons I did that is because all the sculpts, I was mostly focusing on the sculpt itself, like the actual detail in the sculpture, and not so much the color, because my intention with all these is to 3D print them and then paint them up physically. So I wasn't really focused on the digital colors because I was like, it's just an afterthought. It's just for cool promo pictures. And even if I just want them for promo photos for thumbnails on my YouTube channel or posting on Instagram or something like that, it's going to look a lot better with good color on there. Because really at the end of the day, that sculpting detail is not necessarily going to get shown through all the time. It's not going to show through the paint. Whether it's good paint or bad paint on top of it, that's what you're going to see. So you might as well have good paint on top of there because that's what you're going to see. And at the end of this, I'll show you some different photos that I rendered out to really highlight how much painting detail I put into this sculpt versus other ones. I'll show you some examples of other ones. And I'm also going to show you the very first sculpting challenge sculpt I did from last year. The one that I said I didn't record that process, so I never made a video on it, but I still have that sculpt, so I can go ahead and hop in ZBrush and kind of show you what I did in there with that sculpt. So you can see at this point, obviously I'm well into the painting process, and I'm still fixing up some things here and there with the sculpt. But the main thing that I've really been putting off in the sculpture up to this point is the hands, and that's something I do with most of my sculptures just because sculpting hands is hard. I usually by the end of the process am happy with the hands and I actually have fun doing it, but I always dread it, and it's just a struggle. Just getting the basic layout of your hands, making them look good, is so tough. And once you have that, adding in little details and going over and just doing little things like that is really fun. But just the beginning laying out of the fingers and all that, it takes a long time and it's super tedious. So you can see here, I actually just imported the default ZBrush hand model to sculpt over. Again, because hands are tedious to take a long time, and just getting the right proportions in the first place can take a long time, and also getting the right mesh with the right polygon layout can take a long time. So I just imported the default ZBrush mesh, and also I was working on the sculpt for the competition, and like I said, I was too focused on other projects, didn't realize this one had come up, and only had a week to work on it, so speed was kind of the essence. But with the hands done, that's pretty much the end of the sculpt here. I'll just let this finish out, and then I'll show you some final rendered shots, some turntables, and then I'll go in and show you some of my previous sculpts. Here's a little turntable of the final piece, and you'll notice some weird artifacting going on, and that's just because I've learned this new rendering process through ZBrush where I could render out different layers and then merge them to get a much higher quality photo, more cinematic and all that. And I'm trying to do the same thing here with these turntables and haven't quite nailed it down, but this is kind of the basic idea. So essentially you render out a basic image. This would be the same quality as any other video I did. Then you render out an ambient layer, which is just white, but it highlights the details a little bit more. Then a light layer, which would be like the light coming from the left side of the screen. And then if you wish, you can do one with the light coming from the right side of the screen as well, just to make it a little bit more dramatic. And then you merge them all. And like I said, there's a little bit of artifacting because these layers didn't add up perfectly, but then you can see on something like this, just a solid picture, it works really well, makes it look a lot better. And here I just kind of start off with just a basic image, just kind of what I'd get when I'd render out normally. This is what I used to do in the past. And then I would add my ambient layer on top of that, and already it looks a million times better. Just all that detail from the ambient really makes that previous one pop. And then you add your light layer. For this one, instead of doing a left rim or a right rim, I just had the light kind of right out in front, and it just makes everything look a whole lot better. And then of course you go over the top of this with any other effects you want to add, such as glowing eyes or a background or whatever it may be. Once you get a much higher quality image, you can do a lot with it. And this is just another example I have to really show you how awesome this different layer blending can be. And you can do so much with it. It just makes your pictures look, your sculpts I should say, look so much better. Really shows all the detail that you spent all that time putting into them. It really helps highlight that. And lastly, I just wanted to show you guys my my entry for the previous year's sculpting competition, which I believe was fantasy creatures. I believe that was the prompt, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how this guy looks. I thought going back I wasn't going to be very impressed, very happy with it, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how it looks. There was a surprising amount of detail, and even the colors, everything I did. I definitely think I could do better now, but I was actually quite happy with it, especially considering this was kind of had the same issues that this year's competition had, where I didn't know about it till the end, and I only ended up having a couple days or maybe a week to work on it, so I was really just trying to bust it out. I think all things considered, I'm actually pretty happy with it. Alright, that's it right there. I just want to say thanks so much for watching. Anybody willing to like, comment, subscribe helps me out a ton, and I super appreciate it. And you can check my work out on Instagram and TikTok as well if you want to check that out. They're both at Zane Customs. I know this video has been in the works for a while. It's been a long time since I posted, but like I mentioned, I should be posting a lot more frequently into the future. So again, I just want to say thanks so much for watching, and for everybody who continues to come back and watch. I'll see you next time.